Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud while stoned. In this video, we're going to do part 3 of Little Blue Book number 51, titled Giordano Bruno, His Life and Martyrdom. You can see my cover is falling apart. These books are fragile. This one was written probably 1920s, so it's in its 90s. Giordano, on the other hand, lived from 1548 to 1600. On the last video, we did parts 2 and 3, and we're going to start off with Chapter 4. Chapter 4 returns to Italy, the conspiracy. The true aim in life should be illumination. The true morality, the practice of justice. The true redemption should be the liberation of the soul from error and its union with God through consciousness. Giordano Bruno. At first, all went well. Bruno arrived in Venice in October of 1591 and settled in rented quarters. Mocenigo's instruction commenced, but was not followed with any regularity. Bruno tried to instill into his pupils' heads the principles of logic, the elements of mathematics, and the rudiments of mnemonic art. The pupil disliked study. It was commonly understood in those days that superior intellect meant, in other words, sorcery or magic. Mocenigo did not want dry study, although Bruno worked with great patience to teach him. Bruno found time to go to Padua for several months to give private lectures to German students. The university at Padua, at that time, was greatly celebrated. Foreigners of note in science and art were numbered among its scholars. Copernicus reached there in the beginning of the 16th century. P. Rubens at the end of the same. A few months after Bruno had left, Galileo called from Pisa and commenced to teach. September 1592, the prophet of modern science was followed by its creator. In March 1592, Bruno again returned to Venice, and now allowed himself to be persuaded to live in the home of his student, Mocenigo's. Bruno was often seen in the bookshops in literary and philosophical societies which grouped themselves around Andrea Morosini, where, too, Bruno was well-received guest. When Bruno believed he had taught his pupil all he called for, he intended to return to Frankfurt in order to continue the publishing of his works. He desired permission to depart, but Mocenigo, not satisfied with the instruction he had received, had in vain and ignorantly waited to be invited into the magic arts and sciences which Bruno was supposed to know. His pupil had fear mixed with a desire for these studies, a fear because they were forbidden by his church. He therefore denied permission for Bruno's departure, and hinted that he knew means to force him to remain if he would not do so of his own free will and pleasure. Our philosopher must have been greatly deceived regarding his position when he answered that he feared not the Inquisition, for he had not hindered anybody to live according to their faith. Bruno did not look upon his breach with the Church as unamendable. While in Toulouse and Paris, he had repeatedly made the attempt to reconcile himself with the Church, and at this very time he placed great hopes in his work, The Seven Liberal Arts. He intended to forward this to the new Pope, Clement VIII, who he thought was inclined toward sciences, and hoped with it to regain absolution and reinstatement into the communion with the Church without being obliged to return to the order. But events were to develop differently from any that he could foresee. He insisted on his decision to depart and ordered his things to be sent on to Frankfurt. Mocenigo did not dare to lose a moment in order to accomplish his treacherous intentions. The Holy Office would have laid hands on Bruno immediately on his arrival in Italy, but Mocenigo advised certain liberty, saying that he could not escape, and Bruno might further compromise himself. Bruno could not escape. He intended to leave next day, but early in the morning, while yet in bed, Mocenigo entered the chamber and, on pretense that he wished to speak with Bruno, and calling his servant D'Artolo and 5 or 6 gondoliers who were waiting without, they forced Bruno to rise, and conducting him to a garret, locked him in. This was the beginning of his imprisonment and torture, which lasted 8 years. The day after, in the company of his jailer, he was taken to the prison of the Holy Office and left there. The depositions and denunciations made by his enemies were many. At the head of the accusations stands the doctrine of the infinity of the universe, the plurality of worlds. Bruno was charged with the assertion that animal as well as human lives proceeded from a process of dissolution. This may have been a misunderstanding of his bold hypothesis of the natural origin of the organisms. The philosopher, who accepted a manifest order of the human race, knew also that between the animal and human soul only stands a difference of development, all embodying the one being. These and many other doctrines were attacked. The court was opened promptly, and most of the provinces of Italy were represented by their delegates in the early part of the trial. Bruno, on being interrogated, gave an account of his wandering life, his occupations and works. He calmly, and with great dignity, unfolded to this terrible tribunal his doctrine, its principles, and the logical consequences. Serenely he spoke of the universe, how there were infinite worlds in infinite space, how all things and all forms and species were divine. He tried to explain the unity of all things, the dependence and interdependence of all things, yet the existence of God in all. With a spirit not broken by silence and torture, he refused to recant. After 9 months in prison in Venice, Bruno, manacled, was conveyed to the Bridge of Sighs, through the lagoons of Ancona, where he remained incarcerated until the prison of the Roman Inquisition received him. The translator of Gli Irasci Furori aptly quotes in his excellent introduction to that work a poem that seems strangely prophetical. Did Bruno feel the loneliness of his prison and the suffering of the torture chamber when he wrote, "By what condition, nature or fell chance, in living death, dead life I live?" Or yet further, from the same work we read, "The soul nor yields nor bends to these rough blows, but bears exulting this long martyrdom, and makes a harmony of those sharp pangs." In chapter 4. So, in chapter 4, we'll hydrate. Hydrate, Maddie. Chapter 5. The Martyrdom. This wise man fears not death. Yea, there may be times when he seeks death, or at least goes peacefully forth to meet it. Giordano Bruno. The day for the burning was fixed to take place February 16th in the year 1600. Clement VIII was about to hold his jubilee, and pilgrims and prelates from all parts of Italy were present. It's crazy. The Pope was holding a jubilee, so let's burn a heretic. Gotta love the love of God in religion. The morning arrived in the Campo dei Fiori, a flower market. The pyre was made. Bruno, scarcely 50 years old, with thin, emaciated face, with dark, fiery eyes, the forehead luminous with lofty thought, his poor body frail, showing signs of fearful torture, his hands in chains, his feet bare. In early morning, with slow steps, walked toward the funeral pile. Signor Levi gives, in his book on the life of Bruno, an account of how he received the sentence of death passed upon him. You, O judge, feel perchance more terror in pronouncing this judgment than I do in hearing it. Bruno's holy murderers could not comprehend him. I love that, holy murderers. The sun shone brightly that early morning. The fire was lighted. The flames leaped up, mixing with the beautiful sunbeams. The rest is easily told. Bruno stood in the midst of the flames with his arms crossed, his head raised, his eyes open. A calm, steady look rebuked in its gentleness his ignorant and misguided tormentors. When the flames curled cruelly around him, he winced not. Even in his last moments, an idolatrous monk thrust through the blaze a crucifix. But the dying martyr turned his head aside, more in pity than aversion. He was the first in all the world who died for truth without the expectation of reward. When the body was consumed, a monk took a handful of the ashes and scattered them to the winds, and a month later the bishop of Sidonia presented himself at the treasury of the treasury of the Pope, and demanded 2 scuda in payment for having degraded Fra Giordano, the heretic. So, to thee, noble Bruno, thou prophet of science, we in gratitude remember thee, and in humble service again recall thy noble thoughts. It is to thy courage that we owe a great debt of gratitude for laying the foundation for positive science. Laying the foundation for positive science. Thou prophet of insight, the fatal fire that freed thy immortal spirit is dead, but thy spirit has already set many a heart aflame with new ambition and has cheered many a pilgrim to the path. No, humanity, how you destroy your brightest on altars to false gods. Many men from many lands unveiled a monument to Giordano Bruno in the center of Campo de Fiori on the 9th of June, 1889. The bronze statue is placed on the very spot where Bruno was sacrificed. I wonder if it's still there. I'll have to Google that. Somebody Google that and put it in the comments. The Pope, on that day, wept and flung himself into an agonized prayer before the statue of St. Peter, grieving over the desecration of his holy city, prostrated for hours because the memory of a brave man, a philosopher, and martyr had been justly honored. The same church which yet abhors this so-called arch-heretic will, we hope, canonize him in the future as one of their saints who broadened and beautified men's minds. Truly, it is said that the judgment of one age is annulled by the judgment of another. We are expectant and waiting for this recognition, and let us not fear that we shall wait in vain. To die for conviction is a rare and happy privilege. I just knocked over a vape. And that is, well, I guess it's the end of chapter 5. But there it looks like a poem, 3 stanzas. So we'll read it. To Giordano Bruno, philosopher and martyr. Son of the lightnings, and the light that glows beyond the lightnings or the morning light, so splendid with all righteous love of right, in whose keen fire all hopes and fears and woes were clean consumed, and from their ashes rose, transfigured and intolerable to sight. save of purged eyes, whose lids had cast off night. In love's and wisdom's likeness when they close, embracing, and between them truth stands fast. Embraced of either, thou whose feet were set on English earth, while this was England yet. Our friend thou art, our Sydney's friend thou wast. Heart heartier, found and higher than all men's past. Shall not we praise thee, though thine own forget? Lift up thy light on us and on thine own, O soul whose spirit on earth was as a rod, to scourge of priest, a sword to pierce their God. A staff for man's free thought, we walk alone, a lamp to lead him far from shrine and throne, on ways untrodden where his fathers trod, ere earth's heart withered at a light priest nod, and all men's mouths that made not prayer made moan, from bonds and torments and the ravishing flame. Surely thy spirit of sense rose up to greet Lucretius, where such only spirits meet, and walk with him apart till Shelley came, to make the heaven of heaven more heavenly sweet, and mix with yours a third incorporate name. Swinburne, or Swinburne. Sir Philip Sidney. That is the end of chapter 5. And I think we'll go on to chapter 6. Let's see, how many pages are chapter 6? I really didn't expect to read it, but we have the time. So, we have the time, but we may not have that much time. It seems to be quite long. Well, we'll read it for at least 10 minutes. We'll see how far we get. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 6. Bruno's teaching of the soul. The mind which aspires to the divine splendor flees from the society of the crowd and retires from the multitude of subjects. Giordano Bruno. For general contemplation and uplift of spirit, Bruno's ideas require every monad, require much to separate the pure gold from the gross and uneven strains of other matter. His ideas are so great that his philosophy can be compared with various precious metals, the getting of which must be systematically pursued in order to do justice to this gigantic thinker. He might justly be termed a second Pythagoras, whose system penetrates the social and intellectual history of Italy, both ancient and modern. Bruno resurrected those doctrines, giving them a bolder and cleaner outline and a more positive direction. Pythagoras taught that numbers are the beginning of things, or the cause of the existence of material things. They are not final, but always changing their position and attributes. They are variable and relative. Beyond and above all this transformation, there is the immutable, the all, the one. The infinite must be one, as one is the absolute number. In the original one are contained all the numbers. In the one are contained all the elements of the universe. Bruno elucidated from the abstract doctrine fixed principles, giving them more distinct development. One is the perfect number. It is the primitive monad. From the one proceeds the infinite series of numbers, which again withdraw and are resolved into the one. So from substances, which is the one, proceeds the myriad of worlds, and from the worlds proceed myriads of living creatures. From the union of one with the diverse is generated the universe. From this absolute one, the sum of the sensible and intellectual world, millions of stars and suns are proceeded and developed. Each sun is the center of as many worlds which are distributed in as many distinct series. in an infinite number of concentric centers and systems. These numberless suns, with their planets, visible or invisible, pursue their course through the immeasurable space. Each sun system is attracted or repelled, moved by an internal passion or attraction. Each turns on its own center and moves in a spiral toward the center of the whole, towards which center every sun and system of suns with their planets tend with infinite passionate ardor. In this great center resides the Son of Suns, the unity of unities, the temple or altar of the universe. In this altar burns the vital principle of the universe, called sometimes the sacred fire of Vesta. All constellations, says Bruno, are organisms, infinitely graded in size and form, each again infinitely graded and compounded units, the fundamental unity of which, and the last substratum, is mathematically the point, physically the atom, and metaphysically the monad. The number and variety of these monads is unlimited, as is also the number of individuals which therefrom arise, is infinite in the world of centers, whether atoms, monads, or suns. There is progression from ascent to descent, or from spirit to that which we call matter. Every monad is in itself a living mirror of the universe. So, in this entire form, the universe, slumber all monads, and all manner of forms in which matter is capable of expressing itself. Every form is the result of the indwelling soul. Every activity in nature is nothing else but to bring into existence or appearance the latent form. All is thought, passion, adore, or ador, moving into form. There is no end to this form-producing faculty in nature. It is infinite. There is nothing without life, nothing unsouled, nothing dead, nothing inorganic, but all, even the stone, is from eternity to eternity, ever given and uninterrupted motion and change, either in an ascending or a, pardon me, or a descending line. Through all works the same Spirit, the same mind which dwells in and permeates matter. Hydrate. I'm getting a little parched. From the all, this unity which governs variety, from the movement of every world around its sun, of every sun around its central sun, the sun of suns, which informs all with the rays of the Spirit, with the light of thought, is generated, that perfect harmony of colors, sounds, forms, which charm the sight and captivate and enthrall the intellect. That which is the starry worlds is harmony, because becomes in the individual virtue, and in companies of human beings law. That which is light in the spheres becomes intelligence and science in the world of the spirit and in humanity. We must study the harmony that rules in the celestial worlds, that we may understand and deduce laws which govern our earth and civil bodies. Bruno goes on to show that the Bible, the sacred book of man, is the heavens. There does man find God's word and law written. In the science of numbers dwells harmony, and it is our duty to identify ourselves with this harmony. For from it is derived the harmonic law which draws men together in companies. Through the revolution of the worlds through space, around their suns, from their order, their constancy, and their measure, the mind comprehends the progress and condition of men and their duties toward each other. Human souls are likened by Bruno to lights, distinct from the universal soul, which diffuses over and penetrates everything. A purifying process guides each soul on from one form to another, from one world to another. The life of man is more than one little life, with a few experiences and trials. It is to be an effort, nay, a struggle, to reproduce on earth some of that goodness, beauty, and truth which are diffused over the universe and constitute its harmony. The process of growth is slow and apparently full of oppositions, just as our earth becomes formed, changed, and perfected, little by little, through cataclysms, convulsions by fire, flood, earthquake, and eruptions. So it is with humanity. Through struggles, man is fortified and raised. He can go through all by the religion of philosophy and thought. It is the mystical thread, the guiding star through every transformation, occasion, and experience. The vulgar creeds of religious bodies have not, he said, dared to reveal the truth in its purity and essence. Rather would the Church cover the truth with allegories, with myths and mysteries, which they call sacred, and humanity, adorning the veil, failed to lift itself up to see the idea behind it. Men saw through the teachings of the Church the shadow rather than the light. In his book, Gli Irasci Furori, Bruno lays down the basis for the religion of thought and science. We would prefer intelligence and progress of the intellect in the world of physics, metaphysics, and morals rather than the commonly accepted so-called Christian perfections, resignation, devotion, and ignorance. The true aim of life should be illumination, the true morality, the practice of justice, the true redemption, the liberation of the soul from error, and its union with God through consciousness. Bruno shattered the theories of historical creation, which were the prevalent ideas of his time. Nature was supposed to be fixed, not as it grows, but as it eternally is. Nothing can change. Nothing can change it but the arbitrary will of the Creator. He started out with the cosmos and the infinitely great, next to the microcosm, the infinitely small. The body is in the soul in the mind, and mind is in God. Therefore, the life of the soul is the true life of man. So, of all the faculties of man, that which exalts his nature is thought. For by it we can contemplate and comprehend the universe, and thus in turn become creators. It is through the exercise of thought that the affections become purified, and the will consequently straightened. Then is true liberty gained in this union of will and thought. Our philosopher repeatedly claims that blind faith, or supernatural grace, or any irrational and mystical impulse cannot bring illumination, but only the strength of a reformed intellect and an enthusiasm which science and the contemplation of nature alone can give. The divine light is always in man, presenting itself to the senses and to the comprehension, but man rejects it. How complex is the nature of man may be gathered from the following extracts. The soul is in the body locally only as intrinsic form and extrinsic motor. It is that which forms the members and shapes the material from which and from without. The body, then, is in the soul in the intellect in God. The intellect either is God or is in God, as says Plotinus. As in essence, it is in God, which is its life. Similarly, by the intellectual operation and the will consequent upon such operation, it is related to its light and its beatific object. beatific object. The soul is in the body as a pilot in the ship, and insofar as the pilot moves together with the ship, he is a part of it, but considered in his position as governor and mover, is not part, but the distinct and efficient cause. So the soul of the universe, in so far as it animates and informs it, and informs, is an intrinsic and formal part of it, but in so far as it directs and governs, is not part, is not a principle but a cause. Intellect gives laws to sense, and yet deprives it of food. Intellect is a pilgrim and stranger. Sense is more domesticated and at home. Soul complains that intellect is seeking higher life, is neglecting lower, and seeks to recall the thoughts to the care of the body. There is an intellect that gives being to everything, called by Pythagoras and Timaeus, giver of the form, a sole and formal principle that makes and informs everything, called by some origin of the form, one material of which is made and formed everything, called by all receptacle of the form. Sense rises to imagination, imagination to reason, reason to intellect, intellect to mind. Then the whole soul is converted to God and inhabits the intelligible world, whence, on the other hand, it descends in an inverse manner to the world of feeling through the intellect, reason, imagination, sense, and vegetation. I don't understand the vegetation at the end, but pardon me. The Platonists say that the soul, as to its superior part, always consists of the intellect, in which it has more of an understanding than of soul, seeing that it is called soul only in so far as it vivifies the body and sustains it. The order of diverse life which the soul takes in various bodies, and the scale of human powers, has as many degrees as that of nature, for man in all his powers shows all the varieties of being. Bruno on this topic says, therefore from the attachments it may be known whether souls go high or low, or whether they come from above or below, whether they are going to be beast or rising toward divinity, according to their specific being, as we understood by the Pythagorean, Pythagoreans, or according to the similitude of the affections only, as is commonly believed. It not being proper that the human soul should become the soul of a brute, as well said Plotinus and other Platonicists. I have held and I hold that souls are immortal and that they are subsisting substances, that is, the intellectual souls, and that, speaking in a Catholic manner, they do not pass from one body to another, but they go either to paradise or to purgatory or to hell. Nevertheless, in philosophy, I have reasoned that the soul, subsisting without the body and non existent in the body, may, in the same way that it is in one body, be in another, passing from one body to another, the which, if it be not true, at least appears to be the opinion of Pythagoras. That was a bit of a word wobble. In this same work, Gli Erazzi Februari, he aptly portrays the relationship between the soul of man and the soul of the universe, the struggle of the former again to reach its real home. How Bruno tells this can be gathered from the following passages. There is no need to cast the eyes toward the heavens, to raise the hands to direct our steps toward temples, or to intone to images in order that our requests may be more favorably considered. But we should enter into our inner self, reflecting that God is nigh with us and within us more fully than the man himself can possibly be, for he is the soul of souls, life of lives, and essence of essences. He, man, will be present in the body in such a way that the better part of him will be absent, and he will, by an indissoluble bond, unite himself with divine things, considering himself to be too great to be the servant and slave of his body, which he ought not to regard otherwise than as a prison which restricts his liberty, a viscous substance that clogs his wings, a chain that fetters his hands, a log that holds fast his feet, or a veil that clouds his sight. But let him not be a slave, a captive, beslimed, enchained, idle, deaf, and blind, for the body which he leaves cannot any more tyrannize over him, so that the spirit proportionally is placed above the body, just as the corporal and material world is subject to divinity and to nature. Thus he will become strong against ill fortune, magnanimous when injured, and brave in poverty, persecution, and tribulation. Such is the virtue of contemplation, as Imbicus observes, that sometimes it happens that not only the soul abstains from inferior acts, but it leaves the body completely. To see divinity is to be seen by it, as seeing the sun is concurrent with being seen by the sun. Equally, to be heard by divinity is just to listen to it, and to be favored by it, the same as to offer to it, for from that one the same and immovable proceed thoughts, certain and uncertain, desires ardent and satiated, and reasonings learned and ignorant, according as worthily or unworthily the man presents them to himself by means of the intellect, desires, and actions. The same pilot may be said to be the cause of the sinking or safety of the ship, according as he is present or absent from it, with this difference, that whilst the pilot, by his ignorance or skill, loses or saves the ship, the divine power, which is all in all, neither gives nor takes away. It is the conversion or rejection of it by others that causes the difference in its effects. Our cognition will never be perfect in so far as understanding the highest object is concerned, but only so far as our intellect can understand it. Let it suffice that in this and other states there be present to him the divine beauty, so far as the horizon of his vision extends. Let it suffice that all make the attempt, and that each does his utmost, for the heroic nature is better content to fail, and fail nobly in a high undertaking where it displays the dignity of its spirit, than to be completely successful in an ignoble and low work. Better a dignified and heroic death than an unworthy and vile triumph. The intellectual power is never content nor satisfied with comprehend truth, but ever proceeds onward to truths incomprehensible. So also we see that the will which follows the apprehension is never satisfied with infinite things. Therefore, the essence of the soul is not related to any other end than the fount of its substance and being. Wherefore shall we follow the true morality and the right path? We shall be magnanimous despisers of those things which childish thinkers esteem, and shall become truly greater than the gods which the blind crowd adores, because we shall become true contemplators of history, which is written in ourselves, and trained executors of the divine laws, which are hidden in the center of our hearts. This is that philosophy which opens out the senses, satisfies the spirit, enlarges the intellect, and converts man to the true bliss that he can have as man subsisting in this and similar bodies, for it frees him from solicitous care for pleasures and from blind sentiments of grief. That is the end of chapter 6. And that is the end of part 3 of Little Blue Book number 51, titled Giordano Bruno, the story of his life and martyrdom, written by Coulson Turnbull. Thanks for listening, and join me in part 4.